Today, we profile Karol Joseph Wojtyla, aka Saint Pope John Paul II the Great. He was the greatest man of the second half of the 20th century. He was an army of one and the most seen person in history. He was born in 1920 and he grew up in Wadowice, Poland. When the occupying Nazi forces closed the university he was attending in 1939, Karol worked in a quarry and then in a Solvay chemical factory to earn a living and avoid deportation to Germany. Feeling called to the priesthood, he began his studies in 1942 in the clandestine major seminary of Krakow. During that time, he was one of the organizers of the Rhapsodic Theater, an underground resistance group that aimed to sustain Polish culture and morale through covert readings of poetry and drama. In 1946, he was ordained a priest. In 1958, Pope Pius XII appointed Father Wojtyla auxiliary bishop of Krakow. In 1964, Pope Paul VI appointed Bishop Wojtyla as Archbishop of Krakow and subsequently, in 1967, created him a cardinal. In 1978, Pope John Paul I, after serving as Pope for only 33 days. The conclave to choose the next Pope started on October 14th, 1978. And the cardinals were split between Cardinal Giuseppe Siri and Cardinal Giovanni Benelli. On the fourth ballot, Cardinal Wojtyla got one vote. And then it took off. He received the necessary 2/3 of the vote on the eighth ballot on the third day. On October 16th, 1978, Cardinal Wojtyla was elected Pope. Starting with his first address at Pope, he said what he repeated literally tens of thousands of times thereafter. It's the most used phrase in the Bible. 365 times in the Bible, it says, "Be not afraid." And my goodness, are we afraid today? Pope John Paul II the Great would say that over and over and over. At 58 years old, he was the first non-Italian pope in 455 years and the first from a Slavic country. His pontificate of more than 26 years was the third longest in history, and it focused on the bold but nonviolent human rights campaign worldwide. He made 104 trips abroad to 129 countries on 5 continents. He was the global pope and the most seen person in history. On May 13th, 1981, Pope John Paul II was shot in the abdomen and nearly killed by Muhammad Ali Akka. Friends, on 3 different occasions, Pope John Paul went to prison to meet with Akka, the man who shot him. And on each of those 3 occasions, the Pope asked Akka for forgiveness because he had evil thoughts about Akka. Akka was the man that shot him, and the Pope asked him for forgiveness. Chuck Colson told me a story once that God's ways are not our ways. God does his greatest work with the least likely people. In the late 70s, he takes a man, Lech Walesa, without a high school degree in the Gdansk shipyards, and has Lech Walesa start to try to form a union within the Gdansk shipyards. Communist Poland. That's a sure way to go to the gulag for life. Then God brings together two actors who had never met and had never performed together. One was Pope John Paul II. The other had become President of the United States of America, Ronald Reagan. And thereupon those two became great friends. Then God takes Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Will lady, the Prime Minister of England, and Mikhail Gorbachev, the Premier of Russia. And friends, he brings those five people together, and without one bullet, they free hundreds of millions of people from communism in the late 80s. Without one bullet. And they all say that the most important person was John Paul II. He was a magnet for young people. And in 1985, he pioneered the International World Youth Days. And 4 to 7 million young people would attend each year. He was an army of one. He met more people worldwide than any other person in history. He had a great talent for languages, and he learned as many as 15 languages, 9 of which he used extensively as Pope. In 2001, I was honored to meet him in the Vatican and talk to him for a few minutes. I went with Cardinal Maida. And Cardinal Maida introduced me to him, and he said, "Your Holy Father, this is Jack Krasula from Michigan. He has a very successful IT services business, and he has a great heart for the children in Detroit." So the Pope asked me if I was the Bill Gates of Michigan. And I said, "Your Holiness, with a few less zeros." And then he said, "Jack, our future are our young people. Please keep up the great work." Then he gave me a rosary, and he gave me a blessing. It was one of the greatest moments of my life. You talk to anybody that met him, it was like you were the only human being on earth. He focused on you, and that warmth and that peacefulness just radiated. Andreas Widmer, a good friend and a Swiss Guard from 1986 to 1988. And someone we recently profiled said to me, "Jack, he, Pope John Paul II, didn't convince me of the faith through anything he said. He convinced me of the faith by who he was, what he did. I eventually thought, whatever that guy has, that's what I want." In 1994, he was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Pope John Paul II died on Saturday, April 2nd, 2005. Cardinal Maida told me, "Jack, I went to Rome as a cardinal and was there for his solemn funeral. It was celebrated in St. Peter's Square, and he was buried in a crypt in St. Peter's Basilica. Jack, here was this man in a simple pine box with no possessions, no power, no money. And there were 100+ cardinals on the steps going up to St. Peter's. And here on the left were 400 of the most powerful people on earth: kings, princes, queens, dictators. And looking out throughout Rome were 4 million+ people, and a TV audience of hundreds of millions more. People loved the man, and they came to pay their respect. He was canonized on April 27th, 2014, together with Pope John Paul XXIII by Pope Francis. A few quotes, the most famous being, "Be not afraid," tens of thousands of times. Freedom consists not in doing what we like, but in having the right to do what we ought. As the family goes, so goes the nation, and so goes the whole world in which we live. Social justice cannot be attained by violence. Violence kills what it intends to create. The future starts today, not tomorrow. Have no fear of moving into the unknown. Simply step out fearlessly, knowing that I am with you. Therefore, no harm can befall you. All is very, very well. Do this in complete faith and confidence. I plead with you, never ever give up on hope. Never doubt, never tire, and never be discouraged. Be not afraid. There is no evil to be faced that Christ does not face with us. There is no enemy that Christ has not already conquered. There is no cross to bear that Christ hasn't already carried for us and does not bear with us now. Be not afraid. Here is a letter that he wrote in Polish to a priest. To my dear priest, John Twardowski, I extend my heartfelt thanks for the tome Who Creates Berries and for its dedication. Since the dedication includes a petition for prayer, I likewise ask for it. And faithfully as ever, I will read it with complete satisfaction. The good pastor has risen. Hallelujah. With my blessing, John Paul II Pope. Easter, 1986. Pope John Paul II the Great was a teacher of the faith, lover of the truth, admirer of beauty, defender of goodness, herald of mercy, champion of human dignity, guardian of the family, friend of the young, and companion of the poor. I believe he was the greatest man of the second half of the 20th century. That's the story of Saint John Paul II the Great. If you enjoy these messages of inspiration and hope, please like, subscribe, and share them with family and friends. Until we meet again, please remember, with God, anything is possible. Spohom.